So Jacob asked if he could introduce me, but given as he's had to put up with me as a team member at Kalos for the last however many years, I figured that probably wasn't safe. Having an employee introduce you is always a little scary. So we're just gonna. I guess I'll just start by introducing myself as you all get started. I am the most humble person in the entire HVAC trade. There's nobody more humble than me, which is why I'm qualified to talk to you all today about humility and how important it is. I think so in this topic, because it's a weird one. This is a weird topic for me to pick, but it feels like this is a really good moment in time to talk about this. And I want to be clear, whenever you talk about something like humility or any sort of big picture thing, opposite of my joke I just made, is that this is something I work with every day. Like, literally every day struggle with how to have more humility, how to be really who I want to be in the world, who I want to be to the community, who I want to be as an educator, who I want to be as a father, who I want to be as a husband, who I want to be as an employer. And I think you all have similar challenges, similar things that you work through. Some of you have had a chance to meet Leilani. And for those of you who know her at all, you know she's a pretty amazing person. And the other day, she said to me about a particular situation, and I think it applies here. It's germane to this conversation for being pompous for no reason. That's a word you just throw in. Just to prove you have vocabulary. It's germane to the conversation. She said, you're really not being the way that you want to be. And it was like, ouch. Like, yeah, you're right, I'm not. And I'm not going to tell you what it was about. But she was wrong, of course. I'm sure. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what this is all about. It's not about, like, I can't convince you that humility is important. That's not what this is. This is kind of collectively recognizing that we all know that it's important, that we like it in other people, and there's an opportunity for us to think about what does that look like in real life? What does it look like applied, and specifically applied to this idea of thought leadership? So it's sort of a funny title because in one sense I use a very modest word, obviously, humility, and then I use a highly pompous title, which is thought leadership. It's like being an influencer. A lot of people say that. Well, what are you? I'm an influencer. It's like, well, okay. Even the word leader is a funny word. It's like, I want to be a leader. It's like, well, kind of, intrinsic to that idea is that, people are following you. So that's not really something you get to decide whether you are or not. Sort of others decide that. And that's the same thing that's true of thought leadership. But I think a lot of us here, to one degree or another, you found yourself in this position where people view you as a thought leader in the sense that they look to your thoughts to help guide their direction. And it is a really, really awkward place to be. It is a place that I am very uncomfortable. I'm not going to read slides, okay? So I may look at them a little bit. I put this stuff up just as sort of a guide of the conversation. There's nothing worse than a presenter who reads slides. So feel free to read them yourself, but I'm just going to kind of talk about the general concept.
Ty would be proud.
He would be. Well, Ty's already disappointed in me for having slides in the first place. He's having to be gracious with me on this. So yeah, forgive me. But and for those of you who don't know, I have to back up even another layer. Because some of you probably imagine that I'm like really good at artwork and I'm really good at 3D videos and I'm really good at editing podcasts and all this stuff. But let's just strip it away. I've tried all of those things, and if you look at what I did 5, 6, 7 years ago and you saw how crappy it was, that was when I did it. Nowadays, when you see this stuff, this is Emily, this is Ricardo, this is Juan. These are the people who I work with who help me put this stuff together. So to any extent that I'm polished, it's because I have people who help make sure that that's the case. So that's important to say in this conversation especially. Even this presentation, I did not do the artwork or put it all together. Right. That's the only thing I can take credit for is how I hire. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, what family I was born into, I guess. I can take credit for that, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, what is a thought leader? There's a lot of different definitions. I have a definition up there. It's come to mean a lot in social media and training and this kind of world that we find ourselves in. The reason that we're all here, right? We're all here because of the internet. To some degree, this is like online dating at scale, right? This is like This is like a giant room full of tinder up in here, you know? Like none of this would have existed if it wasn't for that world. And like we may be uncomfortable with that. I am. I don't love it, right? It's not. There's a lot about social media and online and all that. I remember when I first launched the podcast, and probably some of you in this room, I'm not going to call you out, but probably some of you in this room, or at least at this event, said some version of, "Are you kidding me? You think you can learn HVAC on a podcast?" And of course, that would be absurd if I thought you could learn HVAC on a podcast. Like that would be crazy. And it is sort of a crazy proposition. And that's never what this was about. But to some degree, at least to some degree, it was about curating people who had thoughts and allowing them to express those thoughts. And that did influence people. It actually changed things. So like some of the really early things, just to be specific, would be like vacuum. Like a lot of people have changed vacuum practices, not because of me necessarily, but because of the amplification of a lot of different voices. And it was not just one voice, right? You think of Appian and all the work that they did, even prior to Jim Bergman coming along, and then he kind of advanced that. And then there was a lot of other influencers, a lot of other people who made videos, and I can't name them all, but so many who said, hey, one hose vacuum, this could work, when other people said, well, no, that doesn't work. And then we argued it out, and then we tried it, and then we're like, okay, this is how it is. And now there's a lot of people who give Jim Bergman or I or others credit for sort of this new vacuum movement, where we have actually figured out how to pull deep vacuums pretty quick, and it actually kind of works now. Like before, we were all scratching our heads. We all knew we were doing the wrong thing, but we didn't know how to fix it, right? So that is thought leadership. That's part of it, but it's not one person. And that's also really key to all of this. It's also not a prerequisite for having a following isn't necessarily a prerequisite for thought leadership, right? That's a key thing. Because just like what I just mentioned, there's a lot of people who were actually more influential in the design of how we do vacuum now than I was. I just happened to be the guy who was one of the first to create a podcast, and then I made a YouTube channel, and then we did other things, right? So a lot of that has to do with being at the right place at the right time, honestly, and being very comfortable talking endlessly. Like whatever that gene is that I have, I can just talk all the time. And so people are like, well, this guy must know what he's talking about. Well, yeah, I'm mostly just robbing from a bunch of smart people, and then I get the credit. It works really great. This is basically my mea culpa, like I'm just basically repenting for all my sins here. And you all get to watch it live on television. So most of the speakers here are thought leaders in different ways. Whether you're an educator, whether you're a social media influencer, as much as that word always kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. No matter what, you are, to some degree, you're a thought leader. And what is it, like, what are the things that we should do as thought leaders universally? Like, what are the things that we have to always anchor ourselves to whenever we're going to stand in front of a stage, or we're going to, create a YouTube video, or we're going to make a podcast or whatever, that's actually going to, it's going to embrace the idea of humility. And empathy is a really big one. That's the one word kind of out of this slide that I wanted to focus on. You need to have empathy, and you need to really embrace professional pride and personal humility, okay? And in order to do that, you have to have empathy. Empathy is like a buzzword that everybody uses nowadays, but what that really means is you have to really see another person. In order to have empathy, that's another buzzword. You have to see another person, which means that you have to listen to another person. It means that you have to actually think about, to some degree, the way that they're thinking and their set of experiences. And so that phrase that I want to kind of pause on is this idea of personal humility and professional pride versus the other way, which is personal ego or personal pride and professional apathy. Okay, so think about that. When you've practiced that, when you've seen others practice that, have you ever experienced working with, I don't know, say a manufacturer, or working with a trainer, or working with a manager, or working with a new hire who has that sort of, personal pride, where it's like, hey, don't you dare, my favorite line is, you calling me a liar after somebody just lied to you. It's like, well, I'm pretty sure you just lied, so I don't know how that works, but it's that kind of thing. That ego comes out, but then when it comes to actually doing the work, there's a lot of this, it's probably fine. That's the line I always talk about whenever I get up here. It's like, that's the ultimate in, we'll say, decay in workmanship. is like decay in quality, is when somebody gets to a point where there's this moment where they have an opportunity for curiosity. There's this moment when you have an opportunity for humility. I'm looking at Ty here because he's like the king of this. And we've had a lot of these conversations. Same thing with so many of us. There's this moment where it's like, hold on a second. Maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. You know, I just said a whole bunch of stuff, and maybe this actually isn't true. And you have this moment where it's like, it's probably fine. Or to say, wow, actually, yeah, because I care, because I'm personally humble, it's okay if I'm wrong. I'm glad if I'm wrong if I can learn something. But now there's this opportunity to actually push beyond apathy and actually really understand how something works. And again, even the reason for that can be tricky at times. It's tied to things like integrity, telling the truth even when it's hard, all that kind of stuff. But your why has to be pretty strong. And for me, when I think about who I want to be, back to that thing that Leilani said to me that was so and very true, is that I want to be the type of person that when I'm talking to somebody, I'm representing something useful and helpful to them, something that's going to benefit them in some way, whether it's a client, whether it's a coworker, or whether it's somebody, all of you who listen to the podcast and stuff. If I'm okay with being apathetic about what it is that I'm putting out there, then I'm not caring about you. I'm not actually serving you. And so if I allow my own self-image, my own personal financial goals, my own vision of myself, as far as where I want to go in the business and all that, to get in the way of serving another person, then that's not empathy, that is apathy, and that is personal pride, not professional pride. I've thought about the word deserve a lot. Deserve is de-serve. It's like the opposite, right? It's like taking serve and turning it on its head. And so much of ego in thought leadership, and I'm getting to a point with all this. I'm setting a groundwork here, but I'm going to actually get uncomfortably specific with some of this as we go on, for myself and for all of us. It's a challenge here. But when you think about service versus ego, it's serve versus deserve. It's service, outward facing, versus what it is that comes natural as far as my desires and wants for myself. Let's talk about some fundamental examples of this that we probably all face. Let's say you've got some new kid working with you, and you are showing him how to do something, and he keeps stopping you and saying, well, Ty Brandeman said, well, Jim Bergman said. It's like, well, why doesn't Ty Brandeman come do it then? It's just that kind of attitude. Because I've both been that guy. So back up. You guys know a little bit about me, but imagine 17-year-old me. Imagine this is the mature version of me. That 17-year-old kid who would never shut up and just always running his mouth, And I literally had a guy turn to me one time and said, well, if so and so, and I think at the time it was out of the rack panel. He's like, well, why doesn't he come and do it then? If you know so much about it, that sort of irritating, persistent thing. And there's this desire that we have, and I have even now, of escaping from that. It's can't I just be left alone? Can't I just do my job? Can't I just whatever it is? And there is no can't I just, right? There is no can't I just. We're dealing with humans. And when we're dealing with humans, and one of our fundamental charges is to serve, not deserve, then I have to think about what is best for this person. What do they need to hear? And sometimes that is a hard message. Sometimes that's pulling them aside and saying hey, man, the way that you're continually interrupting my work is not the best way to do this. Why don't you write down all your questions or statements of fact, and we'll discuss them when we get into the truck afterwards, right? That is a service-oriented conversation versus that frustration that comes out when people are just irritating us. And I don't know about all of you. I wonder sometimes. I look at some of you, and I think, do people bother them the same way that they bother me? I don't know, because they seem really nice. And I meet these really nice people like Craig, and I just think I think this guy actually loves everyone, and that's really disturbing to me. Am I just fundamentally broken that I'm getting irritated all the time by everyone? Yeah, it's not the way I would put it, but hey, you said it, not me. So I'm constantly feeling this tension, and I think a lot of us do, because people can be annoying, and serving them can be something that feels like it feels unfair. I guess that's how it feels. It feels unfair. Show of hands, who here has any children? Show of hands. Okay, who here has any more than 9 children? Leilani? I just like to do that. It's just it's a weird flex, so it's a weird flex. I use my kids as an example a lot, and they just love it. It's their favorite. Everybody likes to be made an example from a stage. It's just their favorite. But no, like you realize, like when you have kids, when you get to the place where they really actually matter to you more than yourself, and you know that all the way down to your boots, like this human being matters to me more than I matter to me. But does that make it easy to like be pleasant all the time, or to be respectful, or to be concerned with their future at every moment? No, it does not make it easier. The fact that you know it doesn't change the fact that they are annoying little twerps sometimes, and they will not shut up. There is so much noise in my house. I wish it would stop. Please, God, make it stop. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You learn that, don't you? You learn little life hacks, don't you? Yeah, I'm going to learn more from Michael about this. We can know something fully. We can know that it's true. It can really be our truth, but that still doesn't make it easy. But continuously thinking about, am I doing this to serve? Am I doing this because I think I deserve? Am I doing it in service of ego, or am I doing it in service of other? Because I can assure you that, and it never feels this way. This is what's funny. When something's unfair, like really unfair, kids treat you so unfairly sometimes. It's just, it's like, look, after all, have you ever used the phrase, like your parents definitely use this phrase to you, after all I've done for you. And when you're a kid, you're like, what are you talking about? Like I do my chores so well. I really deserve. And then, like, you get to be an adult and you say that exact thing. After all I've done for you, after all, your mother and I have sacrificed for you, and we say these things, and it's like, what a silly throwaway. Like it doesn't mean anything. That's now teaching your kids to respect their elders, right? That's a proactive action. That's not a reactive action. That's not ego. That's actually caring, right? But we can tell the difference. If we're honest with ourselves, we can tell the difference. All right, here's where it starts to get specific to a lot of what I want to really encourage our community about. When you see another person in the spotlight who does not deserve to be there, they don't deserve to be there because they didn't put in all the work to figure out this very important thing, or because they haven't worked in the field as long as you, or because you don't like how they appear on social media, or you don't like whatever. You don't like the way they wear their hat. I'll be honest, people who wear flat-billed hats, I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. I'm kidding. Making fun of Jim Jansen. He's been wearing that Kalos hat, flat-billed, and he looks like a 90s rapper. I don't know if he can hear me or not, but it's a really good look. I'm just happy to see an old-school trainer just embracing that, that 90s Eminem look. It's good. It's good stuff. Anyway, there's just things that people do that rub you the wrong way, and so you begin to believe that they do not deserve the spotlight. And it's the old saying, like, I'm quoting so many like simple adages here, but one of the ones that it hits me a lot is like, it's amazing how much you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit, right? If you care about the actual outcome, and usually that outcome is people related. It's like growth in other humans. It's even in its scale, that's growth in a society, or really good movements that are positive. If you don't care about getting the credit and you're happy to support whoever in order to advance that, you get a lot more done. Because petty infighting, which we've seen a lot of over the years, and I've certainly been part of plenty of it myself, really stands in the way of progress, and it often turns off the very people that you're trying to reach. It's really, this is another thing that I can see in my kids, or you can see often in younger generations, is like, think about when you were a kid, and you saw people who otherwise you would have naturally respected, but they were acting like petty children with other people, or they were like maybe rude to your friends, or they were like, they just weren't like, they weren't acting according to their own code of integrity. They weren't acting according to who you knew they wanted to be. It really turns you off to that. And I guess in terms of like a confession, I know that at times I've done this. I know that at times, because early on when we started this whole thing, HVAC school, and there were the people who said, you can't learn HVAC from a podcast. They would also say things like, well, you're just going to teach homeowners to do it themselves, and people are going to get hurt. And there was all these sort of objections, which ultimately, I mean, maybe there's some truth to some of it. I'm not saying there isn't, that it's all, but a lot of it is actually just about creating barriers. It's about creating gatekeepers. It's about saying, hey, look, I've paid the price, and so now you need to come through me to have my stamp of approval to say that you're okay to teach people things. You're approved by me. And it's funny because I have felt those same emotions at times. I'm being honest. I think it's important I think that's an important step here. It's like a 10-step program or something here or whatever. How many steps are there? I don't even know. 12 steps. Yes, okay, 12 steps. Well, that was disrespectful. Yikes. I stopped at the 10th step, so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's the problem. Hey, look, I'm a thought leader, so I can make my own process if I want. I'm an influencer, gosh darn it. So anyway, the point is that you get to a certain point when you've done something a long time and you've put a lot of investment, and initially, I think a lot of us feel very kumbaya, because it's sort of like we're the ones kind of being lifted up, right? We're the ones who somebody's like, hey, come on up, and we're like, hey, that's awesome. And then you get to a certain point and you're like, I'm not bringing you up. You're not approved. You're not good enough. You're not, you don't look the way that I think you should look. You don't come from the place I think you should come from. You don't say things all the way that I think you should say it. But look, I'm the guy who 12 years ago, I wasn't pulling a sub 500 micron vacuum and holding it to a decay test. Are you kidding me? No way, right? So somebody had to do that for me, and if they would have blocked me and said, no, you can't come because you don't live the code. You are not authentic enough for me, then I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. And so I'm grateful for others who were happy for me, who were happy that I was able to start a podcast, even though some of it was super sloppy. Do you guys, anyone remember some of the little like joke skits that I used to have at the beginning of some of like the first podcasts? Why did none of you say anything to me about that? Well, I think you were hoping I would fail, is what I think it was. Like, if anybody if you want to cancel me, go back to like the first 20 episodes and go ahead and listen to those now, and you will I'll be canceled. So I'm just giving you ammunition if that's what you want to do. If that's your intent, I've certainly given ammunition. But there were people who were happy for me through that season of like just flailing around, seeing what worked. And it wasn't like that was that long ago. It wasn't like I was a baby or something. It's just, the community has been so gracious and so helpful that we've made a lot of progress, and a lot of things are a lot better than they were. I think if we ever get cranky because somebody else is receiving recognition, that is a warning sign. Even if there's a good swath of what they do or how they teach or how they speak or the way they present themselves that doesn't fully align with us. We should really be the types of people who are happy for other people, right? That is a fundamental characteristic that we should have, and it's a really good indication of humility and thought leadership. And that is something that I have had it pointed out to me that I'm not always that way. And so, again, confession time, that's something I want to work on. When it comes to ideology, the only thing I really want to talk about here is why? Like, why are we... So ideology goes along with sometimes being idealistic. Those are two different things. It's good to have an ideology. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But ideologies need to be flexible. They need to be flexible in the face of new information. And to the extent that I've ever been resistant to any ideology being flexible in the face of new information, it is not healthy, universally, right? When new information comes out, when I learn new things, new maturities, all that, and I say, no, this is how I've always done it and this is how I always will do it, that does not serve. That does not serve because it's a sign of ego. And sometimes that ego is defending someone else, actually. So, like, sometimes it's defending our parents, right? It's something that we were taught, or it's the way I always did it. So I'll give you an example. There's a lot of people who have the ideology that you have to be an apprentice for 2 to 5 years before you should be allowed to do X, Y, Z, right? Whatever it is. Well, I'm not saying that there may not be some truth to some of that in terms of like in aggregate, but humans are individuals, right? So a person's individual capability to be capable of doing a particular task, that is that individual. And a lot of times the reason why we say those things, or I see people say those things, is because they're saying, I had to do it. And so if they don't have to do it the way I had to do it, what is it? It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not just, right? Compared to what, right? Compared to what? What is more important? Is it more important that we get quality work done for our clients, serving the industry, growing the base, getting people excited about doing what we do, bringing other people up? Or is it more important that people have to go through what I went through? You know, it's like one of those, it's almost at beer can cold level. You know, like, you know, that was one of the first t-shirts that I did, and like everybody got it initially, right? Was that image of the guy holding the suction line. We all know beer can cold. But there's the other one is like, man, you should have met my journeyman. You should have met the guy I had to work with. He would throw a wrench at me every day and send me for a sky hook every 10 minutes. You know, that guy, he was awful to work with. Well, as if that's some excuse, that's something we should compare to in how we treat people. It's absurd. It's got absolutely nothing to do with it, yet we all have that because it's this sense of deserve. It's this sense of fairness that we have in ourselves. And that's not humility. All right, so when do opinions really matter? If they're Dustin's, then they really matter. Yeah, apparently. When do opinions actually matter? They matter when it's about something that we have to actually make a decision about, and it actually affects us, right? When I have to make a decision about where my family is going to live, then my opinion matters, even if it's just an opinion, because it's like my decision to make. It's part of my responsibility to make that decision. Decisions around Kalos, about things that we do, my opinion, my experience really matters. But often, as thought leaders, we give advice about things where our opinion does not matter. Do any of you love it when people give you unsolicited advice? You do? That's great. It's your favorite. Matt loves it. Actually, I think Matt Bruner probably may be one of the few people who actually doesn't mind that much. You seem a little more open-minded, a little easier going than most. So I could actually believe that from you to some degree. But most people do not enjoy that at all. And why? Because the person giving the advice does not have to bear the consequences of the advice that they're giving. Right? How often, Kimberly and I talk about this a lot, how often do engineers and sort of the intelligentsia of the construction world or the design world or the manufacturing world give advice or make these really strong statements about things that they do not bear the consequences of? Meaning that you can say things like, oh, well, you should do this, you should do that, this should be done, all this stuff, and then we show up and we're like, yeah, there's nowhere to run the ducks, right? Like, we cannot fit them in this space. And they're like, well, I guess you're going to have to figure it out. It's like, yes, and it's easy for you to say because you don't have to do it, right? And that is legitimate. That's actually very, very legitimate. I heard the phrase that opinions that cost nothing mean nothing. And the more I thought about that, the more I actually really believe that's true. A similar statement, which is even stronger and maybe a little too heavy for this group, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that love without sacrifice is not love, right? If we don't sacrifice for something that we care about, then we really don't love it. And that's true of humans. That's true of our work. That's true of everything. Like, it requires it. It's a prerequisite, and it's why we do things like have children. Have you ever thought about, again, like I keep going back to the kids thing, the same thing is true of like adopting a dog or whatever, but like it makes no sense. Having kids is crazy. When they come out, they need you to do everything for them. And then, just at the time that they can help you out, then they hate you and they say mean things. Right? This is a total scam, right? It's a scam. And it's like out of one side of our mouth, we say that, right? And out of the other side of our mouth, we know that's not true. We know that the very reason why it's worth it is because it's a sacrifice, because we do not get anything in return, nor are we expecting anything in return. When you get a dog, you're not like people say, I get a dog because it helps protect the house. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, whatever, Or the guy who says he's all against cats, and then he gets a cat, and then he becomes a cat guy, but he won't admit it, him and the cat are on the same team on everything, right? I mean, like, that's it. Like, when we are in service of something, we can actually truly love it. When we let go of the deserve and we actually serve, when we let go of our ego and we actually care about the thing in itself because we have sacrificed for it and it becomes meaningful to us. And that is, again, ultimately mostly true about other people. It's easy to criticize and destroy. Building is the hard thing. It's a great quote by Nelson Mandela. It's so true. Everybody's got an idea. Everybody's a critic. Everybody can criticize something. And here's the trick. Just because you've got an audience, just because you can stand on a stage and talk to people, just because you have some authority, maybe you've got a C in the first 3 letters of your title, that does not give you the right to tear down. It does not. We should be in the business of creating, and even sometimes creative destruction, right? Sometimes you do have to tear some things down, but you tear it down because you're building it, right? That's why you're doing it. And you have to be clear about your intentions in that. A lot of times we make excuses and we say that we're doing it for the right reason, but if we're honest with ourselves, a little bit of introspection can show us very quickly that's not true. On the topic of introspection, lest I sound like an endless navel gazer, just constantly analyzing my own intentions and everything, I strongly believe that most of us cannot truly understand fully our own intentions. This has been proven in cognitive sciences that it's really hard for us to know fully what our own intentions are. But introspection in service of humility is always worth it. Introspection in service of deserve, introspection in service of why am I the way I am, right, isn't always worth it. Sometimes it is, a little bit, but mostly it isn't. If you're introspecting because you want to actually express humility and you want to actually be a person who shows love and care for others, that is worth it. These are, Emily put these together, and when I saw these, I was like, I'm only those of you who don't know what Emily and Juan do, there was a time that I edited all my podcasts. There was a time that I wrote every word of everything, and I don't do that anymore. Emily does a massive amount of writing. Adam does a lot of writing. Matt does a lot of writing. They're amazing. I do a lot less writing than I used to do, and I also am just less present. It's mostly because I'm a lot of reasons that I won't go into. But she extracted these, which means that I must have said these things somewhere, and I can't believe that I said it, and I didn't ask her for the exact source. I'm not going to read them out loud because I don't know the context, but they just look horrible. I almost cut this slide, and then I thought, well, that would kind of work against exactly what I'm saying, wouldn't it? I can be pretty condescending. You're so dumb. I'm so smart. Why can't you be like me? I had to admit. Hopefully, I was criticizing myself when I said that, and not actually saying that. But the point is that even introspection that is making an excuse for bad behavior, or you're analyzing yourself, but then you're analyzing yourself to the end of saying, yeah, I was a total jerk. I was unkind to this person, but I had a really good reason. I'm having a hard day. People will say this to me all the time. They'll say some version of, well, you have a lot going on. You're very busy. You have 10 kids. You have a business. You have a lot going on, and so they make an excuse for me. How dumb, right? There's no excuse for being unkind. There's no excuse for being an ego monster. There's no excuse for treating people badly. And as a thought leader, you just have to, I'm suggesting that you consider saying, okay, I'm going to not allow myself to have any excuses for being that way, ever. Common not so humble thoughts. That was my idea. I deserve credit. And now, again, you don't always say these things. These are thoughts. You wouldn't put these words to it. But one really common one is that I am entitled to be heard. My voice deserves to be heard. And as soon as you get to that point, man, you've lost, right? If our thought is that person deserves to be heard, totally different thing, right? You cannot apply the same thoughts that you apply to other people to yourself in that same way, right? That's not directly reciprocal. Because when you're saying they deserve to be heard, you're saying they deserve for me to hear them, right? You do not deserve for someone else to hear you. It's a really important distinction to make. If you get to the point that you always think that you are necessary to a cause or to an idea or to the preservation or defense of something, that's a really popular one nowadays. I'm defending whatever, our country. I'm defending our faith. I'm defending whatever. And if that means that you think you are an integral part of that, then you are not thinking correctly about yourself objectively in terms of the cosmos, right? We are a tiny, tiny speck on a tiny, tiny speck, right? So for us to think so highly of ourselves that we believe we are necessary is completely wrong-headed. However, if we think of ourselves as having an amazing opportunity, having an amazing gift that we get to participate in, and it's a gift to us, we see it as the ability to some degree be able to maybe get someone to think about something a little differently in a productive way. That's a completely different paradigm than what we have up here on the screen. We know what humility isn't. It's all this stuff up here. We don't think of ourselves as better than others. We don't think that we have some magic sauce. We don't think we're necessary. We don't see ourselves as the originator of new ideas, because we're not. We may kind of repurpose something. We may have some little gift that we're given that we can share things in a different way. But we are not instrumental to the cause that we champion. Okay, that is a hard one, and that's one that probably some people would push back on. A line that I have used at times, or heard others used, is, we're changing the industry, okay? And to the extent that we mean we're changing the industry, yes. But to the extent that I say we, but it's a royal we, and I really mean I, right, then it's not. I guess a royal we is the opposite, right? That's when you say we and you mean somebody else is going to do your work for you. So I probably said that backwards. But the point is that if by we're changing the industry, I'm talking like a couple guys, a couple aging white dudes, and we're just sitting there kneecap to kneecap, so excited about our nerdy little pursuit, and we think that means that we're the ones changing the industry, then we're wrong-headed. But if we can look up and we can say, yes, I have this small piece in something that is much bigger than me, and what a joy, that is how we can actually change things. Some people naturally come across more humble than others. But that does not mean that they actually are, right? That's another key thing that and again, that's not necessarily what's on here, but it's something that I wanted to talk about, because there is sometimes a form of humility that is actually just self-deprecation, which can often be a defense mechanism. Okay, so one of the things I catch myself doing a lot is I say the thing about me that I want to say that's negative, so that way somebody else doesn't say it. Or I can control the narrative about what's being said, right? If I can say something bad about me that has a good excuse for it, well, then that is okay, and I can manage that. But if I have somebody else accost me with their helpful opinion about me, then that's somehow unacceptable, right? Have you ever had that? Like, the idea of being able to go back and introspect and say, okay, yeah, I can see that I was wrong about this. And then you go to somebody and apologize, and you apologize to them, but it usually has a, well, I'm really sorry about this, but, and then they come back at you with some like, yeah, actually, and you freak out on them. I've done that a few times in my life. That indicates that you were not really sorry in the first place, doesn't it? Right? It indicates that what you were trying to do was manage the situation. And so even sometimes self-deprecation or false humility or all that is still focused on self, rather than focus on, hey, I want to listen. Somebody has something to say. They have an experience to me that's negative. Maybe they've been hurt. Maybe they've been overlooked. Maybe they've been whatever. I need to be able to listen to that. And that is always hard. Always. But what I think as thought leaders we have to learn to do is not try to preemptively manage it and just let it be, let it happen. Let people say their piece. Because often there's no truth in it. Often there is no truth in it, but it's still very valuable for them to be able to see their piece. Even more often, there's a lot of truth in it. And then if we are humble, then we will do something with that. Imposter syndrome I don't think is a bad thing. It's talked about a lot like it's a really bad thing, but all of the people who I look up to the most, when you actually have a candid conversation, to some degree experience it. And it's just the simple feeling that if people knew what an idiot I actually am, they would not be listening to me, right? And so there's only a couple things you can do with that, right? You can push into authenticity, into vulnerability, which is, I think, very healthy, or you can just roll it into this feeling of dark expectation, right? Which is something I have struggled with on both sides, right? The first, I think, is better, but it's still painful. The second is this idea of, well, they can never know. Right, I'll make sure they never find out what a moron I actually am. And then that just becomes a heavier and heavier burden. Have you ever had somebody, and again, to some degree, this happens here, but I'm sure it's happening to many of you who are thought leaders to some degree. People walk up to you and they say a lot of nice things about you. And sometimes it actually doesn't feel that great, right? And why is that? There's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons I think it is because being put on a pedestal is actually not a nice feeling, because we're just human, right? And it isn't like this. Sometimes I describe it as, like, I'll do a thing where it's like, I'm just a regular guy, whatever. And actually, I am superhuman. I don't know if you know this. I do have no. No. But you want to do that. You want to deflect rather than actually address that core emotion. And the core emotion is, this makes me feel trapped, right? This makes me feel trapped into being something that I already don't feel like I am. In fact, in the moments of emotion, you feel totally confident that you are not what they are saying, right? Rather than just, you have to be that guy, right? I was struggling to get the words out. Thank you for doing that. I know. No, I was. Thank you. It is, yeah. No, we're vibing. That's what the kids say nowadays, right? Vibing. I'm learning the lingo. You have to be that guy, and you know down to your socks that you're not, right? Rather than just saying, like, thank you and meaning it, and also realizing, and I'm also probably going to disappoint them at some point, right? And just being comfortable with that too, right? Because it was never about me in the first place. And to the extent that it was about me in their minds, they will eventually overcome that as they grow. And isn't that great? Right? Isn't that great? Just like, regardless of whether your kids, and this is actually, sorry to keep doing the kids thing, but this is actually something that I've learned that I think will resonate with a lot of you. It's like, if you train your children well, you teach them how to have conflict, right? Would everybody agree with that? You teach them how to manage and have conflict. Like, they don't just avoid all conflict. What's interesting is that once they become teenagers, who becomes the problem that they must solve for? Parents, right? And so we're so shocked. It's like, I thought I trained them well. Well, the very thing that you did do, which is train them well, you taught them how to have conflict, you taught them how to work through their problems to some degree. Now you're the problem, and so they're working through you, which is really handy because then they don't live in your basement for the rest of their life, right? So they actually grow past you. But like, that's a good thing. It's this idea of like, when parents will say something like, I want my kids to have better than I had. I want them to have, I don't want them to have to experience what I had to experience. And we see the fruit of that in those next generations where it's like, yeah, but now they're not really capable of dealing with the problems you dealt with, right? And so that's not all healthy. That avoidant desire, that just like, hey, we're just not going to, I don't want to have to deal with that. That's not how it works. So for us, again, back to what I'm talking about here, if we're teaching people, if we're in a position of authority, if we're in a position where people are coming to us and saying, man, thank you so much, ba, 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 thank you. And knowing that, man, I hope someday they make videos that then I'm affected by. I hope someday I can go to classes and I learn a ton from them. And that being the thing that you look forward to, not the fear that, oh no, someday they're going to find out that I'm actually not what they're saying I am. We talk so much about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I just want to put it up here quickly so you know what it is. It's basically like, at the beginning you think you know everything, and then you're like, oh crap, I don't know anything. And then you work your way up to where you actually do know something. I think that at the end, the plateau of sustainability is still lower than the initial one. That's where I kind of disagree with this. I think you never get back to the level of confidence that you were when you knew absolutely nothing, right? But I actually see a lot of people slip backwards on the Dunning-Kruger. This is something that when I first started talking about it, I didn't think about this. But they actually slip backwards the more idealistic that they get, the more that they find themselves moving back into an ivory tower. Let's use an example. Me. There was a time where I worked in the field every day, and I had to look in customers' eyes, and I had to collect money from them. And when a call came in at midnight, and you have that work phone ringtone, anybody know what I'm talking about? That, or back in the day, it was the pager. The zzz, zzz, zzz. Like that is that suffering creates clarity, right? It does. Like you become very clear on what the realities of the world are. The more that you separate yourself from that, or just become separated from it, it's not, none of us, like there's no version of me at this point that could be as connected to reality of the field now as I was then, right? Even if I run a couple service calls, I was so proud of myself because I went and worked on a refrigeration job and helped, do some coolers, and then there was a leak left afterwards, and I'm sure it wasn't me. It had to be somebody else because I know how to braise. I teach people how to do that, okay? Definitely wasn't me. And so we can actually slip backwards. And the sign of that slipping backwards is this sort of stubborn idealism, where it's like, but I know. If you would just listen to me, why aren't you doing it the way that I told you, right? If you have an entire team of people and you keep telling them how to do it, and you're telling them it's going to save you time, it's going to make you money, it's going to do all this stuff, and they never adopt it, it's a pretty good indication that you're just disconnected from reality. Pretty good indication, unless you have just an entire team of buffoons who don't know anything. But that's, still kind of a you problem, I guess. The reality is that's not what it is, though. What it is you are disconnected. Now, sometimes it maybe it's just a few small tweaks. Get out there, figure it out, listen, and you'll find a few small adjustments. Sometimes it's a wholesale change of your mindset. That's like, nope, I was wrong, they were right. Straightforward, right? It's funny when I give these types of talks because around this room and outside and all this, I'm looking in the faces of people who have worked with me for a really long time, and they're like, yeah, I'm having a meeting with you tomorrow about this. It's like, okay, fair enough. The idea, the fundamental idea, and it's the idea that don't let perfect become the enemy of good. Don't let our idealism bring us to a point that we actually can't even make the next step forward. And that's especially true when you're influencing other people. Just remember, don't forget, when we were kids, sometimes we were like, were my parents ever kids? Like, do they remember what it was like to be a teenager? Put yourself back in those shoes of being that technician and having that pager go off and having to deal with the customer who's like, I could buy this for $20 on Amazon, right? And the pain that is, and we're like, no, you need to offer it as an upgrade. You need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. I hear it all the time. I did a leadership panel at AHR, and it's a good panel. They're really good people I respect. Like, no, I'm not faulting them at all. But I find ourselves saying, well, they need to learn, you just need to learn, you need to educate yourself, you need. And it's so funny. Because I'm like, okay, I'd like to go have you do a maintenance with like my most basic tech and see how you do. Why don't you need to learn how to do that? The reality is that respect is fundamental at every level. The guy who's sweeping the floor, the technician who's doing maintenances, the technician who's on call and is facing that. And I find myself drifting sometimes. And usually I snap, I'll say something condescending, and that has to be an indication that, no, I'm off base. It doesn't matter how off base they're being. That doesn't exempt me from treating them with respect and kindness and all of that, right? Because remember what it was to be that person. Remember the thoughts that you had towards your leadership and what morons they were to put you in these positions. We're no different. Cannot get separated from those realities. This is a quote that Leilani posted on social media the other day, and I think it's so true for me. You guys know I'm a Christian. You know what I believe about a lot of this stuff. I'm pretty open about it. But this line is from C.S. Lewis, and it says, "There are three images in my mind that I must continually forsake and replace by better ones: the false image of God, the false image of my neighbors, and the false image of myself." And that's not only one direction, right? It's not like it's sometimes the false image of myself is that I'm worthless, that nothing that I do matters, right? Sometimes the false image of my neighbors is that they're all idiots and nobody cares about anything that I care about. Or it could be the opposite. It could be the inverse. It could be that I'm amazing and everybody else isn't, or whatever. But we have to constantly be recalibrating these images. We have to be willing to learn. And the only way that we learn is through others, through being open to others. It's actually something that I thought a lot about, which is this new, the buzzword intentionality, right? Intentionality is super hip right now. And I'm to be clear, very pro-intentionality. It's a good thing, okay? But intentionality can come to me in a type of focus that blocks out the periphery. Right? It's like, hey, there's all these people, all these humans who are yelling at me, who are waving at me, but I'm intentional. I know who I'm going to be 10 years from now. Brain science has shown time and time again, studies have shown that we are horrible at predicting what we are going to be like in the future. what we're going to care about, what our lives are going to be experiencing. And so some humility is necessary there as well, even in our own projections of where we're going to go. Yes, you should be intentional. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Yes, you do need to have focus. Absolutely. But if that means that you're blocking out other people, or if that means that you think you know your future self, you don't. You just don't. Another really cool thing. So I listen to this podcast called Hidden Brain. I highly recommend it. I've learned a lot from it about neurobiology and just a lot about, just how humans actually think and what actually drives our behaviors. And one of the things that's really been proven over the last several years is that memories are not these fixed files in our brains. So our memories are affected by our recall, how we process it on recall. It's kind of like when you take a copy and you make a copy of a copy and you make a copy of a copy of a copy. You know the movie Multiplicity where he just kept copying himself until he wasn't able to do anything anymore? Yeah, it's like that, only not a stupid movie. Memories are not fixed files. So when we take a memory and we process it in a particular way, especially an egotistical way, it puts an increasingly egotistical jade on that story. If we process it in a humble way, which is not self-hatred, it's not self-belittling, it's not self-focused at all, ideally, when we pull those memories up and we process them, then they're going to remain more accurate because they're going to be more outward focused. And even if they're not accurate, they will be a better version of that memory. That is not up for debate in terms of current brain science, in terms of currently the way they understand this. Every time you pull out that memory and process it and put it back, the way you processed it impacts it. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying by that? And you're probably like, what the heck fire and brimstone does that have to do with what he's talking about right now? Because this is why people get increasingly disconnected from reality as they process things egotistically. Well, back in my day, I used to go to school 5 miles in the snow uphill both ways, right? We all have our version of that. Every generation does, where it's like, back in my day, everything was perfect, and I was perfect, and I had bulging muscles and everything else. And you look at pictures, you're like, what the heck? Like, what happened? Totally different image. I'm going to stop here because I'm already running over. You can be modest, you can be humble, and be completely compelling, dynamic, interesting, motivational, all that stuff. That does not, modesty and humility does not mean that you cannot be a thought leader. It does not mean that you constantly have to say, well, ask somebody else, don't ask me, I don't know anything, right? It's not at all what I'm saying here. That's not the message. But what I want to get across is really fundamentally, it is thinking about serving and not deserving. It's thinking about what do other people need, and being super, super excited when they grow beyond you. And that doesn't mean that they grow without you, right? And in fact, if you let people grow beyond you, then it's actually much less likely that they will grow without you. That to me is a huge lesson that I've learned in a lot of different spaces in my life. That this desire to hang on to something, to hang on to influence or power or my own story about myself, or my own story about the industry, or my own story about what's going on, that people do not like that. And it's for very good reason. We don't like it in other people when they do that to us. And so that's my call to all of us collectively, is that we're at a moment right now where there's a lot of conversations that really took a positive turn. There's people talking to each other and communicating in ways that are really amazing. But then I see these moments where me and other people try to grab back some of that power. Like, well, what can I do with this now that's going to benefit me because I deserve it? I've put the work in. I am special because I'm me. And that's not going to get us where we want to go. It's not. And at the end of this, I'm confident when we kind of look back on our story, when we look back on our work, and we were sacrificial in terms of how we served other people, we are never going to regret that. We're never going to regret it. And that means that sometimes people will wrong us. That's what vulnerability means, right? Vulnerability means that you are open to attack. You are open to being taken advantage of. But man, that's worth it. Really is. And for me, that is who I want to continue to be. And I'm asking you all authentically, hold me to that. Like, I need to be. It's not, I don't operate every day in the way that sometimes maybe the public image, the people who like me, the ones who don't like me have a different story, of course. But I need the people who like me to say, hey, man, like, that wasn't cool. And those of you, yeah, Bert, yes, Bert. Thank you. Thank you. Not asked for, but you know what? It's a proof that sometimes it's not bad, right? But again, now I'm asking for it, right? And I would encourage you to do that with others in your life as well. Like, be willing to open up your blind side to people who care about you. Surround yourself with people who care about you. Of course, there's a point to cut people out who are really hurting your life and all that. I'm not saying that there isn't some truth to that, but don't be quick to do that, because it's so easy to be quick to say, nope, you're a loser, you're out, right? We're all flawed. You know, we're all subject to this same stuff, these same feelings and these same emotions. And if you are the person who has wronged somebody, just tell them that you were wrong. And if they double down on it, say, okay, you're right? Because that feeling of deserve is going to pop up even in those moments. So, as this relates to HVAC, this is very big stuff, you know, that like relates to everything, but specifically as it relates to HVAC, just remember, just listen to people who actually are doing it. And when what you're saying is like, no, it's not working because you're not doing it right. No, it's probably not working because you're not doing it right. I'm not doing it right because I'm not explaining it right, because I'm not listening, because I'm not paying attention, because I'm not being humble. It's amazing how much my mindset changes with 2 days riding with a guy in a truck again. It's like I become a different person. And isn't that indicative of a problem, right? Isn't that indicative of a problem? All it tells me is that I drifted. If that changed me so much, then I drifted. And I have to always make sure that I have that accountability to keep myself back there in that place. So hopefully what all of you are hearing here, whether you're a thought leader or you're somebody who follows other people, just realize that as you walk up this, like, we are all subject to these feelings in different ways. We're all subject to these ways of being. And we have an opportunity at every juncture to make a right or wrong decision, but wrong decisions aren't fatal. Just back it off, back it up, be humble, be repentant, go to somebody, be willing to eat crow, be willing to say you're wrong, be willing to take it, be willing to listen. You're never going to be sorry you did that. You never will be. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching. If you're willing, give this video a thumbs up and drop us a comment. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to stay updated with all of our future videos. And as a quick reminder, HVAC School isn't just a YouTube channel. Dive deeper with us at our main website, hvacrschool.com. Curious for more knowledge on the go? We've got you covered. Tune into the HVAC School podcast, available on all your favorite podcast apps. And while you're at it, join our thriving Facebook group. Also, don't miss out on our free mobile applications available for both iPhone and Android. We're all about community. For techs, by techs.